Then we are complete. And then we are complete and ready to go. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody here in Brussels on the campus. Welcome, everybody in Ghent who are watching their live with us in the hall as well. And welcome, everybody who is also watching live, but at home. So there are three different audiences following this engaging debate. Let's hope it will be engaging. Please participate, you here in the hall, but also people can participate directly from Ghent by interfering, by asking questions, but also through the Q&A, and we can bring you people from the Zoom, can bring you in online here directly on the screen, so you can ask the question yourself. So please, people who are listening in from abroad or just from home in Brussels, please engage as well, because I think it's going to be an engaging debate. I read a little bit about the speakers, just met them as well, but I'm very excited this is going to happen. One announcement, it was also announced that there would be the dean speaking, and I can assure you I'm not the dean. I'm Lilet Breddels. I am partly organizing the debates and within this Assemblea, so the starting week of the university. The dean couldn't come today. He will do the official opening on Thursday. When it's the other way around, on Thursday the live event is in Ghent and the streamed event is here. He will do his address from Ghent and it will be streamed live here. So please come again. We will come back to the program of Thursday later. So I will say a few words, not about the opening of the year, because as said, that is what I don't know. What I do know is now in Brussels in a very special campus that is called the Brussels Way. It is a specific way of organizing education. The Brussels Way is led by a curator who is here in our midst. Maybe he's going to say something later on. It's Patrick Moyersoen. You will meet him when you study here, or also people from abroad. And we get some packages, which is... Merci. So this meeting, let's say today, so these are 2 weeks full of information, new information for students who just started, coming from everywhere, coming from abroad, coming from Belgium, but from all angles of the world here together. Some of you are already for the second year's students, but some are totally new to the campus and both the campuses. So everything is still a bit like, where are we? So these weeks are meant to make you feel welcome. Please use it and use us, use every staff, but also fellow student that you see, to simply ask questions. No question is stupid. Sometimes it's very hard to communicate a full program, to communicate where is what, and don't get lost. Please ask a question before you get lost. The program is started actually last week already with a lot of information and with a debate about the 4 engagements of the faculty, in which all the master program at least is organized. And they are the urban cultures, legacy, the craftsmanship, and the mediating tactics. So there are 4 different lines of thinking, and when you choose a studio, when you choose your path in your studies, you can connect via one way or the other to feel at home in a certain strand of thinking, because like you all know or will become to know, architecture can be so many different things, and what you are going to become later on will have so many different angles. So you can have your own office, but you can also become a curator. You can also work as an educator. You can work in so many different fields, and the faculty is organizing its education along all those different strands, that maybe you become a researcher, maybe you become a hands-on builder. Tonight, to focus on tonight, that is not organized by the faculty, it's not organized by me, but it's organized by students, master students from the Faculty of Architecture, who make a combination of organizing a workshop and organizing a debate along, let's say, alongside the topic and the theme of the workshop. Which is actually super nice, because the workshop is tomorrow. Unfortunately, you cannot subscribe to that anymore because it's full. That is a pity, but please, if you subscribed or inscribed and you cannot come tomorrow for some reason, please mention it to them, because there are, I think, 15 or 18 people on a waiting list, and it would be a pity if they would miss it because people are not showing up. So I want to thank them and introduce them at the same time. So it's three students who organized this, which is Mumtaz Viviane, Marta Delagrange, and Laurane de Rotor, who could come please forward to explain a little bit more about why this and what is the workshop tomorrow.
So tomorrow we are planning to build, okay. So we have the plan tomorrow to build a bench, kind of a picnic spot, but also kind of an open air classroom for our school, and also the Lucas School across the street at the St. Maria Square, which is a square next to the church in the street. So we have the idea to use circular materials. So we gathered these materials during the last few weeks, and now tomorrow we are planning to build and design the bench on the day itself.
The intention was to create a kind of team building where international and national students could get to know each other and could form a bond. I think that will be all. Thank you, Lilet.
Again, thanks for doing this. They did not even come up with the theme and the idea and the workshop and organized it, but also came up with our incredible guests. So they were invited by them as well, which I'm super happy that you're all here. Welcome. And who actually portray altogether a kind of overall of a field of circular building, because they said at some point it has so many aspects, this circular building, this building with, it's not only about materials, it's not only about how the resources are being used, but where do they come from, but also how they are being used. So there are also social aspects to that. And on our very left, we have Laurane Coornaert with her organization, who is invited for that aspect, specifically the participation aspect, the social aspects. So how do you organize circular building and self-building with people? So she will go on to explain about that later. Thomas Ooms, next to that, part of our university, teaching and also one of the curators of, in this case, the craftsmanship. We invited him, they invited him for the design part of circular building. Then next to him we have Stijn, who's also connected to the KU Leuven and also part of Rotor DC. And of course, I think Rotor DC needs little introduction to you. But he is invited for the materiality of the circular building part. And last, but certainly not least, is where it all ends up with, that somebody actually has to make it. So we have a maker here, a craftsman, Arnaud Pardon from Atelier Circuler. and he will explain how you actually do it. So I would say that if you have those 4 people, then tomorrow you can actually just do it. So I would like to start and give the floor to you, Leuven. Sorry, one more word. I didn't introduce that well. He asked me to do that. The format of today is that they each talk about 6-7 minutes, come up with a project that is actually specific for this way of working and explains a little bit what they do. After that, we start talking to each other with you, between you and with the people from the other 2 locations. So that's it.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and thank you for being there. So, as I said, as we introduced, sorry. So I'm an architect. I studied here in Brussels, and I started this project, Degré 47, 1.5 years ago. I wanted to be more conscious, feeling when I was an architect, I was not feeling enough the materials and how to understand how we build and how to give the opportunity also to the people to understand how to build. That's why I started this project of helping the self-builders, helping the people that want to build by themselves their own house, and how to use sustainable materials and how to reuse the materials and how to use the tools. That's how I'm today, day after days, helping the people in many different kind of projects. It can be more social or more with different kind of project. But today I wanted to talk particularly about one kind of project that we made this year. It was it's a homeless from Belgium that asked me to build for him a house that he could move with a bicycle. And so I was working with some interns, architecture interns, and we made a group of, we were 5 people, and we were trying to organize how to build a house for him, like a kind of a tiny house, but that you can move with a bicycle. And so that was the objective for him. So we started to define what were the challenge. It has to be lightweight, it has to be nomad because he wanted to move every day. We had to define the dimensions that could fit on the streets also so that he could move it. It has to be solid because of the wind and the path travel. Thank you. Sorry. It has to be safe also for his own security. He asked himself for us to build it with recycled materials because he has some intention of being like defining a kind of a project that could be sustainable. And then it has to be kind of aerodynamic. So we designed some and waterproof also because of the rain for sure. So all of these challenges, we had to design a prototype that we made this design. We designed something quite simple, and we tried to find different situations that how to design the doors and the window and how we could manage to reach all this challenge in one kind of small house. And then we started with the crowdfunding to get some funds to find the materials and the tools and the place where we could do it and the transportation. And then we had to research the materials. That was one of the big topic, how to find materials. We use materials that could fit, that could be light, but solid, but structural, but also easily to find, and how we could go out of the box. Because finding wood is easy today, maybe, but it was too heavy for this prototype. So we had to find different kind of structural materials that I will show you. So this, we made a list of what kind of materials we had to find. We had to find insulation. We decided to make the structure in metal stud, like in metallic structure that we could reuse. And we found also some panels that are made from publicity, like plastic panels in Forex, in print shops that we found from, like we asked them to give us their trash and different other materials. So all the little materials with the air, it's reused. And all the rest we had to buy. Unfortunately, we could not find everything reused. All the fixation, like the tape or the string that we need to use, we had to buy them, but it was really minimal. I could say that maybe 80% of the whole object was made out of reused materials. And so to find the materials, we asked to many big organizations or office or association that exist today. So today there is Atalis that is reaching a lot of different reused opportunity to reuse materials. In Brussels also, there is Rotor also, Atelier. Like today, it exists many different ways where we can find reused materials, but finally, I don't know, it was not really, we could not get a lot of results out of it. The most, I mean, all the materials we found was more because we contact personal people, like we asked some, we made some call, we make some newspaper articles, we went to the radio, we went to the television, always asking to the people, and that was most efficient for us in our case. And finally, yeah, we could find a lot of materials and solutions to build it. So we started to design the trailer to be mobile. And then we decided, so we reused a lot of metal studs that came from a construction site, because as soon as they move the wall, they cannot use it anymore. They just destroy it and it's going to the trash. So we decided to take it back and we designed all the structure out of it. And then we could reuse a lot of insulation panels that made also the rigidity of polyurethane panels that made the rigidity also of the walls and the floor. And step by step, we could go on with the, so this, we insulate the walls of the objects, and we were building. All the construction was participative, so many people came to help us. For example, here, the man that is there is the homeless himself that came during 2 days to help us to build it. But in total, I think at least 30 people came. We took 1 month to build it entirely. And then we designed this. Also, this cover, it's cover that was also reused from publicity covers. Please ask me if you don't understand something I'm explaining, don't hesitate. If I would like to get to have an overview of what happened and how we could have done it better, I would say that the future owner, so the homeless, was really present. We called him a lot to ask him, but I think that we could have more implication for him, and also maybe more time after the construction to test the trailer, but we were in a rush and we had not a lot of opportunities with the space we rent to build it and everything. So I think when you make a prototype, I think it's really interesting to have the time to test it, to try in many different situations, to be able to have an overview of what was good or not. It's important to be critical on what you do. And this is something we could have done better. And what did we learn? It's that the planning is important. And I don't know, you'll also try to research a lot of materials for this workshop. I think this takes a lot of time, even if it's, okay, it's really cool to reuse materials, but it takes time to look for it, to find the good materials, and then to find the design adapted to the materials that you find. And after also to clean the materials, maybe sometimes you find wood with a lot of nails, or you find some dirty materials that you need to clean, this takes a lot of time that you need to take in account. Also the budget for the small materials that we could not reuse, like even for another workshop, like the screws, the nails, this is something that is sometimes more difficult to reuse, and this also sometimes is the biggest budget that you will have. And the transportation also, and the time of the transportation. Sometimes you can find, okay, it's really nice, but it's far away, so it takes also time, and the way how to move it, where it comes from. It's also important to have a local overview of what is close here, what can we find here in this region or in each zone. And it's, I think it's one of the big topic of also circular economy in the materiality. Yeah, and everything go to the design process that you will design with the materials and then this. And also having the idea of reusing a circular economy, you have this difference of using, for example, you have a door, you can reuse the door and take it and move it somewhere else. You can also just reuse a door from the trash, or just make something else from a new, make a new project. This difference in between recycling, reusing in different kind of, different ways. And it's important to understand what are the topics of, what are the particularities of the characteristics of every material that you can use, and what characteristic you need and what you can use for this. And this is also just an overview of when you recycle materials. I think you can really go out of the box. This was when I was in Portugal. We built a foundation with tires. We made also walls. This was another social project where we had a wall out of bricks. We just decided to cut it, not bricks per bricks, but just in blocks, and then we move it and we construct it again. And for not, if you need to destroy a wall, you can just destroy it. It makes a lot of trash, and then you just need to buy new bricks, and it doesn't really make sense because you need to move a lot of trash and then to bring a lot of materials, and then we decided to cut it into parts. That was really interesting process that I didn't saw a lot. I need to finish, okay. And then we use wood. It's the end, yeah. And thank you, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
Directly over to Thomas, I guess, and we keep the questions later on.
Hey, good evening. And it's really interesting to see how, on the small scale of that prototype, the story of reusing and of circularity and of adaptive reuse, etc., also plays in almost exactly the same way when we look at something of a bigger scale. Thank you. Let's see, we have here, you see, we're in the context of a building that was constructed in 1969. It was designed by Structuur. It's not so far from here. It was the first project of the behemoth project of the Manhattan project of the Brussels North border. And we're actually at the Coornaert Tower in Brussels. But you see also on the image a stack of tiles, a stack of flooring, which is natural stone, which I think almost 6 or 7 years ago has been harvested, recolted from another building from the 60s, the one of the Generale Bank in Brussels. We see the floor that was designed by Jules Wabbes and used in the more representative parts of the building. So in fact, what you're sort of witnessing here is a form of transplantation of one material of a modernist building into a new building or into an existing building which is being reconverted. The fact that this material has been stored for 5 to 6 years, that means something. Because it's one of the elements in the debate and in the knowledge and the experience of circularity, which at the moment is not under control or is not studied. Because this logistics of harvesting a material and then temporarily storing it for that moment when somebody might find a use for that material, that is something seriously to take into account when working. Just checking how it works, just a second. Yeah, super. And this is the moment actually when it is repositioned on its new location. Again, an office building, again, a quite public atmosphere or public atmosphere of a space in which is being repurposed. The tiles were cleaned, they were prepared by our colleagues here from Rotor. And then after a couple of years, again, I can't emphasize it enough, placed on their final or new destination. One of the things that is important to know is that these tiles, they have been designed under other set of rules. That flooring has been designed under another set of rules than the one that applies today. So when we have a large surface of flooring, you know that we need to have these dilatation joints. Okay? This floor has never been designed to cope with that. And as a consequence, during the construction, we emphasize that please follow the shape of the floor when you place it to create your dilatation joints. Unfortunately, we couldn't because of the legislation. And now, every 8 meters in a space of, I think, 45 meters, there is a cut through these beautiful tiles, which of course prohibits the one-on-one reuse of them in future. Can't seem to get the hang out of this one. There was another image that I wanted to show, but it's not there. But let me tell it in another way, even without the image. It's a similar story. We're in the same building, and the socle or the plinth of that building was constructed out of blue stone. I think, if I remember well, 575 tons of blue stone. We planned to recuperate it and to reuse it, but failed to notice that on the construction plans, part of this blue stone was used as lost formwork. So it meant that they were placed, and then after some time, when the floor was cast, the cavity was filled with concrete. This means that these blue stones were actually physically attached to the structure. When we try to remove them, harvest them in order to reuse them in a similar way or on another location in that building, of course, we had to damage a lot of them. At the same time, working with these big pieces of stone, some weighing 800 kilos a piece, you have to imagine that they are placed vertically and that we need to take them off their position and then gently place them somewhere else so that we can, again, store them for later reuse. As it goes, obviously, some pieces failed. They were too heavy, so we called in a second crane. So you have to imagine now a ballet of 2 cranes trying to get a grip of this 800 kilo heavy stone, not to damage it, and then gently remove it. But then you have to place it. And then something interesting happened, because a technique from restoration and construction site came in handy. Because what used to do, or what was done, is that when you place heavy objects, you place them on a pile of sand. And this is actually what then was done. 2 cranes lifting 800 kilo pieces of bluestone in a ballet and then gently placing them on a heap of sand. And then transport happens, and then time. Because again, we have to wait before part of the building is being constructed in order for this recuperated element to be replaced. Again, in the same kind of ballet used by a couple of cranes. And this is where I think at some point our architectural practice can change. Because it can change from a practice that sort of determines things, like this panel has to be that wide, this has to be that heavy, that color, that joint, etc., into a transformative practice. A practice that tries to work with what is there and sort of adapts to what is available and repurposes that. And of course, that is somehow a practice that is more about maybe the realization of space and of architecture than it is a practice about the construction of space. And with that statement, I would like to give the floor to my colleague.
Maybe first of all, a small technical question. Would it be possible to show on the screen only the presentation and not the video? I mean, if it's possible, it's too hard. It's not an issue for me, but it could be. I mean, like on this small screen here in front of me, it would be nice to see, but okay, it's fine. I'll do it. First of all, I think I would just like to correct a small misunderstanding. Actually, I'm working for Rotor, the non-profit organization, and not DC, which is a quite small difference in the sense that, as you can see here, Rotor DC is in some way, I mean, now it outgrows it, but in some way it started a project from Rotor in 2016, as a sort of way as a project to see how we could dismantle and resale, salvage, and reclaim building materials. But inside the structure I work into, I work mostly on a variety of projects in the Rotor, such as design, design assistance, exhibitions, and also research. I think in this last segment, the research segment, I will also present one project. A project we'll shortly used in the first presentation, which is the example of the palace. Okay, that's what. So Opalis is actually a research project which initiated in 2011. It's still an ongoing project in the sense that we started with first small fund we got from the Brussels environment in 2011, and we from there on we started to first in some way cover the small region around Brussels. And in this way, I think the aim of Palace is, as they're written on the screen, is to facilitate circulation and reclaim building elements in construction and renovation projects. So we see actually these professional dealers as a key link between in some way the extraction and the integration of reclaimed building elements. I think in general, we can see Opalis as a directory or an inventory
of all the professional dealers in Brussels, and today also in Belgium, Netherlands, and France. I think this is a small part of the application form that we use to get a public funding for a PALS in 2011. And I think you see here, which gives a huge, gives an important touch on the way we approach the circular economy. And you see here in general, the project takes a pragmatic approach. In the sense, we will in some way cover the existing reuse market and will not start from a blank page. I think this is in general also important the way Rotor approaches sustainability. I think Rotor has a huge as a certain emphasis on the historical approach on sustainability. And I think also here in this sense, I will go further on the historical aspect of a PALS and also the reclamation market. But I think maybe puts right now a huge emphasis on this aspect, but I think it's really important if you're talking about a circular economy, you don't try to start from a new idea, or if you want to start from a blank page. Last week, I finished our batch of PALS dealers in Netherlands, and I got a feeling that mostly in Holland, there is today a certain discourse on circular building where they are mostly trying in some way. I mean, it's a small part of the discourse, but it's still existing today, where they're trying to find in some way an economy, or they try to invent an economy where you go from construction site A to B. So not without the dealer in the story. And I think this is also, I mean, in some way, most of you probably know Thomas and his ideas on the circular economy. Thomas is someone who likes to talk about material passports. I think this idea is really, really huge in the Netherlands. I think for certain aspects it could work, but if you're only talking about materials passports and you in some way trying to to give the idea that indeed we could find a circular economy without integrating a reuse dealer, I think this is a wrong way of dealing it. But this is just one short story why I'm presenting Opa's here today again. So back to the pragmatic approach. So these are a few images of our first round in Brussels, which was in 2011, as I already told. And we just went to the dealers and we asked, what are you selling? How are you doing it? What are the services you're doing? Service you have in your pockets as a dealer, and also what is the start space you have here, and just to have a really general and a really clear idea about, okay, what do we have right now in the circular economy and what does exist today. And this is the first batch of dealers we did, which was in 2011. And I think one also important aspect of this is that we ask the Brussels government to not only integrate the dealers in Brussels itself, also the ones in a scale of 100 kilometers around Brussels. Because as we're talking about an economy is mostly broader than only the region we're talking about. And if we're talking about building materials and reclaimed building materials, and if we want to facilitate the Brussels region, it is important to watch a bit further than only the Brussels region itself. And this is Opa's today. And as you can see, in these last 10 years, up until today, I think in 2022 or at the end of this year will be, Opa's will exist 10 years. And as you can see here, we have not only Belgium or Brussels, but also the whole region of France and Netherlands. And I think this last part is also a part I've worked quite hard on. I mean, the last 2 years, I think once or twice a month, I did visits in this region to have a really clear idea of how is the reuse sector yeah, what is possible right now in the Netherlands. And there's also, I mean, it's not integrated in this slide, but there's also small parts of the UK which is covered, which is done by the AA students. But I will go further on this on the last slide if we have still time for that. And then again, why do we think that these reclamation dealers are the existence or the huge emphasis of a palace on the existence of reuse dealers? Why is this important? Again, we believe that the expertise that reuse dealers have, the high skills and knowledge about materials is super important. You have the services, such as the treatment, the cleaning, and the preparation of the materials for reuse. And then last but not least, the ability to storage and to stock reclaimed elements and materials. So actually, in short, the logistics of reuse are mostly covered by the existing dealers. And I think also if we maybe go further into the debate, I think for us also today, it's super important to support the dealers if we really want to create a circular building economy. Yeah, I think in the next few slides, I will just show a few images I've taken during these trips to the Netherlands and also in Belgium. Yeah, it's quite hard to cover a project as a palace in 6 minutes. So I will just show the picture and maybe draw up quite a few quick notes on this project, but on these photos. I think here, if we're talking about the idea of treatment or the idea of the service that these dealers provide, as you can see here, this is a reseller in the north of Netherlands in Friesland. It's called Pullman, and which is a reseller. I think it's now, for 30 years in the business. I think before the idea of circular economy or the circular word was really in use, let's say in architectural discourse. But as you can see here, there's a pile of bricks and fragments of buildings, which are all piled up. I think it's about 6 tons every day. That's what Pullman told us. I don't know how far how real this is, but I think maybe in the summer months, they were really processing piles of brick each day, and everything was done by one student, one guy who worked there only in the summer and who was cleaning bricks the whole day. I mean, we could also question some way the labor which is involved in the circular economy and also in these kind of these kind of companies, because there's also something to say about this. It's kind of double. I mean, there's a story which is, I mean, on one hand, I think it's really good to have these socio-cultural, I mean, the socio-economic features of the reuse economy. I mean, you're having a local economy. You can have jobs which you don't have to study for 5 years, and plus you have a really connection with the material itself. But on the other hand, most of these, the context in which they work isn't always super great. Also in this case here on the left, it was, I find it somewhat problematic, mostly because of the noise, but it's something which was, I think part of the company itself, and it should be addressed by the company. On the right, you see after the removing of all the mortars, on the right, a pallet of fresh bricks ready to be integrated in a new project. I mean, we see the same story here at Frank. On the left, we see today still people removing all the mortar from the bricks and in some way rejuvenating these elements for new use. And then we see on the left hand and on the left side of the slide, we see all these pallets stacked, and on the right, we see a project, I think from Bluff, where these bricks are integrated into a new project. I think I implemented the picture on the right because I felt in some way there's also maybe a little side note to be made, because in some way you could say like, okay, if we just repeat this process, we could use these bricks for 10, 20, 50, maybe 100 or 200 years. But as you can see in this building, the mortar which is used today is a mortar on the with cement, and if we use a mortar with cement, these can be cleaned off, because from this moment the cement really acts as super glue, which made that all the bricks are just one huge one piece, and it's just totally impossible to remove the mortar from the bricks and to reuse the bricks. So in some way, this is actually also the end cycle of the bricks here. So this will be the last time these bricks will be used, which is also in some way something which should be noted and should be addressed, maybe also in future projects. Because I will just go a little bit further on this, but I will stop after hopefully 5 sentences. But let's say, I mean, before the 50s, the building industry used mostly a mortar based on shellac. And all these buildings, also all the bricks we see here are bricks from before the 50s or maybe the 70s. But every building constructed after the 70s are just impossible to reuse or to recuperate. I think also the project of Palace gives a really clear idea about the limits, but also the possibilities of reuse. And also here, if you speak of a treatment and the strengths of these reuse cellars, we see on the left a reseller in doors, which you can see is cleaning off the doors, it's treating the doors for future reuse. On the upper right-hand corner, we see a reseller in Maastricht, I guess, or somewhere in the region of Maastricht, which is who is I think linked to a demolition company, and who is treating and cutting all the beams into perfect dimensions. And when we saw the storage for the first time, I remember in 2020, we really thought this were just all new beams. That, I mean, these kind of resellers of Voltex who are treating the bricks and making these perfect and making them reusable again are really the kind of deals we really need, and which also make the circular economy in some way credible, as a possibility. And as you can see here, we see also other pictures of mostly demolition companies, which is something we don't have here in Belgium. I mean, we have demolition companies, but not the demolition companies who are also recycling their materials. But that's something that is in the Netherlands really impressive, the variety of building materials you can find at these demolition companies / resellers. And then I think in the right-hand corner, we also see a reseller in greenhouses, which also show, I think, in some way the huge variety we try to bring to Palace, because we have the idea that even from the smallest antique shop, we can learn a lot of things in how to treat materials, how to clean materials, and how to make them ready for reuse. Okay, and here's the material page of a Palace, which show all the categories which are right now available. Now, just a small epilogue of a Palace. I will go really, maybe it's not the right time, but I mean, the first thing I think I've already told is, I mean, the idea of reclamation dealers and reuse dealers is not something new. I mean, if we go to the mid-90s and even up until the Romans, we can find a lot of examples of reuse and reuse dealers in the city. Like here we see an example of a demolition contractor in the mid-19th century, which is just after the huge demolition works from Huisman and Napoleon III. And you got these large demolition contractors selling reused materials. And we have this nice quote underneath. One day said do, and I went to this huge construction site where all the garbage of collapsed terraces piled up. Old historic fireplaces, wrought iron gates, marble bathtubs, illuminated joints from famous hotels, just as the Les Duguières Hotel, stairwells, shutters from Flemish houses, etc. Which gives a super good idea about the historical omnipresence of the reuse dealer. And then I think I have also here, there was a video, and maybe we can show it. It's just only 2 minutes if you still have time for this, but it just gives an idea about the global perspective of Palace, but it's not necessary for me if we don't have time for that. So it's fine. It's only 2 minutes. Yeah, fine.
Hallo, mijn naam is Arnoud Pardon. Hi, my name is Arnoud Pardon. I work for a non-profit organization in Leuven called Atalia Circulate. We have two main projects. The first one is the open workshop called Atalia Circulate. There we go. We have a space provided by the city. We installed a lot of woodworking and metalworking machines there, and they are available for the public. So people who want to make their own furniture or tiny house or whatever can come to us. We teach them how to use the machines in workshops, and then you can create your own projects in our workshop. We do some tailor-made projects as well on order to gain some money to organize the workshop and pay for all the machines and stuff like that. We try to work with reclaimed materials as much as possible, and the way we gather those materials is with one of the projects we do called urban mining. With this project, we go into the city buildings that are going to be demolished or renovated. We go and remove all the reusable materials from the buildings, sort of the same way Rotor does. And we gather them in the Materialenbank, which is a project we try to organize with the city of Leuven, where we stock and sell the materials we gather. We also try to work together with recycling parks and places like that to get as big as influx of materials as possible. The fallen wood project is something we recently started as well, and a lot of trees in forests or gardens, when they have to be removed for sickness or after damage from a storm or something, they're chopped down to firewood, but it's still very good and nice wood to be reused. So we go to the people's house, and then in the garden we can slice them up into boards or beams, and then later we dry them and reuse them in projects or sell them as raw material. The project I'm going to use to demonstrate a little bit of what we do is the recording studios we built. The first one was at Rosenberg, which is a non-profit organization for aiding and promoting young bands, for teenagers who want to take their first steps in music, and then they wanted a recording studio, but it's very expensive to build some. So they came to us with the question if it can be done with reclaimed materials. The same for Studio Bern, which is a sub-department of the Department of Youth from the city of Leuven, and they work mostly around hip-hop music. We got most of the materials from a place called the Filmfabrik, which was a recording studio for movies. And they also had a sound studio, and the building was sold, and they contacted us so we could go in there and reclaim all the materials. So it was kind of a coincidence that at a time we could go reclaim all the materials. We also got the question to build the recording studios. But it's a very nice example on how we used, I think, 99% of reclaimed materials to make a new project, which could last for a pretty long time. The only materials we needed to buy were the screws, and same as with your project, maybe the tape. And this is one of the spaces, it was a small studio, but this is one of the spaces we decorated with reclaimed installation materials, reclaimed wood beams from a house, a roof in Leuven, which was refurbished. We cut them to size and fastened them all into the walls in such a way that they could be easily removed as well without as much damage to the building as possible. We filled up the gaps with the installation material. Then we placed a cloth to capture the dust, which may come from the rock wall. Then we placed a audio cloth, fire retardant cloth, as a finishing. and then finished it off with oak and some acoustic panels. Also the vocal booth and everything, the installation was all reclaimed materials. The decoration of the room would be done by the youth who is going to use the studio. This is a picture of the materials we could remove from the Filmfabrik, where we gathered them all. This is a picture from the other studio we built. The wooden acoustic panels came from the library, from the city of Leuven. The installation materials came from a museum, also in Leuven. The cloth came from a monastery. It was a cloth that was used to make the clothes of the fathers and the people who lived there. So it's all different materials from all sort of different places, but came together for a single use in one space. And this is, yeah. That was a short presentation of the project we did.
Thank you all for this oversight in recycling world, of which a few aspects already are quite poignant, and that is the question of time was raised often, the question of transportation and the question of storage. I think that all 3 or 4 of them are quite heavy, but what I wanted to start with is actually something you said, Stijn, and you brought up maybe the biggest problem, that's the end of recycling, the end of materials. What is the last step in recycling, and when can it stop? And that could be, so basically the question would be, what would be the next step? Is there, when there's so much talk about when recycling isn't the way anymore, because we will in the end start providing service instead of creating materials. So at some point we will have a service which we are not, which is not owned by somebody, but you rent it out. Would that make a difference in the way things are constructed? Maybe first to you, but I would be interested to all of you, how you think about that new trend, if you can call it trend.
Probably the service trend. I think, first of all, I don't think if we, I mean, product as a service won't make a product durable in its own self. I mean, I don't think, I completely don't believe in the idea for certain products maybe, but I think that's just this idea, it won't be sufficient to make things durable. I think we can take a look indeed at the example of the electric scooters here in Brussels. This is also product as a service, but I don't think this is necessarily durable or sustainable. Yeah, and maybe a second point. I think it's also really hard to, in some way, project this trend maybe onto building materials, because first of all, we have this long-term contract of a building material, and let's say you're not happy with the provider, how are you going to handle this problem? I get the feeling that it could be like too big to fail. So for me personally, I don't believe in the idea to project this on building materials in general. Plus also, I think it could also lead to maybe a dangerous monopoly on building materials. I mean, we could make the analogy with car dealers or car manufacturers such as Mercedes. Let's say 50 years ago, you could have a general charges, or maybe even 20 years ago, you could repair a Mercedes, a Volkswagen, or an Opel, etc. And I think when we go into a product as a service, you have this Mercedes dealer who will provide the product and will also repair the product. So you get in some way a monopoly of these services or of this product, of these products. And plus, if we look at the case of Opalis, it would indeed mean that all these third-party resellers who in some way operate in such a way to make flexibility possible, do not say like, okay, we can use a brick from here and a brick from there, and we can make a huge I mean, we can make piles of bricks from different kinds of bricks. So I think it could in some way lead to dangerous monopolies for building material manufacturers, as the same we got with Mercedes resale. So to come back to your question, I think again that it could be maybe useful in certain cases, but it isn't an all-in answer on the question of sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I can add to that. I think for some things it works really well. Take energy, for instance. So the idea of energy as a service then means that somebody installs top-notch heating system or energy system somewhere in the area of your house or your project, and then you buy this energy. I think that's a service. And I think with some things it works, energy, for instance, maybe light, as long as probably you don't have an emotional connection to it. For instance, of course, with the brick, at some point you can have a very emotional connection to a brick. And that will change over time because your emotional relation to that brick is different than somebody else's emotional relation to the brick. And then, of course, we're talking about taste, etc., etc. So in that sense, for some things, I think as a service, it can really work very well. And some things there are also just, there is the condition humaine, our human aspect of that. Sometimes we want something new. Sometimes we dislike something just because we dislike it. That is a really important factor in the evolution of material, in why some things are reused and not, and why some are applauded or not. I think that's sort of the hook there. It's either we are emotionally attached to it, and then it's difficult, or not, and then it's easy.
Laurane, you have something to add?
I agree with what you said. And I think it's also kind of depending on the tendency of the mode. Yeah, like the design is changing also. And this is part of the whole process of the architecture also in general, of the construction building. But yeah, that's why I think it's interesting to have to show the example of the project that you showed by already thinking of how we build and already being able to know we can adapt it in the future, and already thinking that's not that today what we build won't be can be temporary, and already thinking of what will be after.
So it's more in the connection between the materials than the material itself?
Yeah, maybe.
Like your example of the bricks that can't be taken apart anymore. And it's about how to make connections and how to be able to take it apart again in terms of reuse.
Yeah, I was more thinking of the studio that you showed when you thought about the wood pieces that were assembled in a way that we can directly also remove them without touching too much the existing part of the building, and already thinking in this shape, in this kind of maybe thinking more neutral, and then.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you could also think of the opposite, of the inverse of that, that you try to make it as difficult as possible to demolish or to demount. And that you, for instance, like the structure here, that you celebrate that structure and that you keep it in place as a structure. I think circularity is not always about making it easy to demount or to bring it back to its original components. It can also be about designing something which we cherish with or without an emotional connection because it has certain qualities to it. So maybe we should design more for non-circularity, but for permanence in a sense. To heat up the debate a bit, I guess also. But seriously, and if you go further on that, for instance, it's a pity, and this has to do with legislation. When an investor or a company or a non-profit organization wants to construct a project and they do want to make that into a structure which can sustain more than 20 years, they are hindered by the fact that I don't know how to say this in English, but the fact that you book your project over 20 years in your accounting, yeah, it's stupid. A structure making that in your bookkeeping for 20 years, that should be 50 years, that should be 100 years, that should be 200 years. And if you do that, of course, in a financial logic of accountability, then that cost per year diminishes with a factor. So, and this is, maybe we should have somebody from the Department of, or the Faculty of Economy next time here present in the debate, because I think it's also a really interesting track to explore.
Sure. Maybe get the whole board on board. Is there somebody who has a question or something to bring?
First of all, thank you for your time and being here. Beautiful projects you guys have. My name is Fadil. I just started my bachelor in KU Leuven. I was a former student at the Faculty of Architecture in VUB. And from what I've heard is that they're terminating, I might be wrong, they're terminating this curriculum called Building Techniques to replace it by circular building. And so here comes my question. I have it might be silly, they might be silly questions because obviously my knowledge of architecture might be, you know, very small compared to you guys and the audience here. I have two questions for the two of you to the left, and one question for the gentleman to the right. Forgive me if, yeah, I'm not good at remembering names. So my first question is, why is it important that we get exposed to this idea of circular building as students? And second question is, what can we expect as students and aspiring architects of this idea in a few years of circular building? And my question to this gentleman here is, we've heard that we can date circular building as far as back as the end of 19th century, but I think we can all agree that, yeah, at that time, the Romans had a local economy. I mean, compared to nowadays, we have a really international and fast-paced economy, and circular building it takes a lot of craftsmanship and many hours and effort. Isn't it more expensive to engage in circular building as an individual rather than engaging in, how do you say, fast-paced and prefabricated building? So yeah, that's my question. Isn't it like more expensive? Because I agree that it would be interesting to have like an economist here to discuss the fact of this aspect. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, like the very beginning of my statement was that there are no silly questions. So, and I think they're quite relevant. So please.
Maybe just the educational point of view. I personally do not like to talk about circularity. I call it a critical circularity conjecture. I think most of the debate on circularity is the business of promises. We promise that if we design something today in a certain way, people probably will reuse it in future, which is, I think, it's a guess. We don't know because of different reasons. So in that sense, it remains a conjecture. But why is it important to be confronted with this is that I think at the moment we have a luxury position because we are rich to experiment with thinking about how we will reuse materials once we have to, because our resources are limited. At some point, it will be either impossible or too expensive to harvest and to get new resources. So that means that at some point there will be a turn again in the economical model in which it probably will be, and that comes to your second question, by economical conditions cheaper to reuse than it is to harvest new materials. That's a reality. It's a bit like peak oil, the concept of peak oil. Peak oil is a concept that where at some point the cost of harvesting oil, I need to say something else. There always will be oil on the world. It never will be depleted. Why can I say this? Because at some point, the cost of extracting the last piece of oil will be not in relation to the profit that can be taken out. And once you get into that shift in materials, circular economy will be a container concept because it will be the default position. And this is, in a sense, we are doing, all of us, prototyping. We are prototyping how our current economical models of working, of designing, of building would react to such a situation. That is what we are exploring, I guess, if I can speak for all of us. That's really the question that we are trying to address. We're not solving the problem of resources. We're not inventing a circular economy. We're trying to see how would that work in our way of working and what kind of economical models are able to cope with that idea of circularity.
Thank you for your questions. I think also what I wanted to add to these answers, it's that reusing materials, it's also for you that are now studying architecture or almost finishing your studies, to understand how to design with this also. And sometimes you need to start with what you find and then think about the project. Today I'm building a tiny house. We started the whole project just finding windows, and we just found all windows. And then with the windows, we decided to understand where we place the windows, and then to design the wooden structure, and then to think about how to make the bracing of the structure, and then to decide the rooms and everything. Sometimes it's also kind of another way of thinking architecture and how to build and how to start with the point of view of what do you have locally, what do you have now today here, and what do you need, and what are the characteristics of the materials, what are your needs, what is the challenge, and thinking of maybe kind of turning the logic you can have.
And to jump on that, it will be really interesting the moment that you don't find a window anymore. Then it will be really, that will be a really interesting moment to work with as a designer. Fuck, no windows.
And finding what was the window for. It was just to bring light, or just to open to ventilate, or was it only for the decoration? And then you can see what is another object that can give light. It's maybe not a window, it's maybe something different, or maybe just opening, or just depending of what is your needs. Yeah.
It's a question for me, right? Yeah. Yeah. I think Thomas Ooms already answered the whole question actually. But
sorry.
No, I mean indeed. At the moment, to work with globalized cheap materials is so much, new materials so much easier than working with reclaimed materials. It's just the way it is right now. I mean, we're in a certain situation where the price of materials is just way lower than the price of labor. So I think if we really want to change that, we'll have to work with legislation. And I think as long as we're working with such cheap materials and labor that is so much more expensive, then indeed the reclamation, the cleaning of the stones, and all the logistics which are embedded in the material itself won't be possible, or it won't be a financial choice. But yeah, indeed.
Coornaert, maybe? You can just talk.
Hello. Yep. Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add, but we do get a lot of questions from people who want us to build something for them. They want us to use reclaimed materials, and then they are always surprised that the price for using reclaimed materials is much higher than using fresh materials. Because most people, as you said, don't really think about the fact that you have to go somewhere, demolish the building yourself, you have to clean up the materials, you have to transport them, you have to stock them, you have to rent a space to stock them, and that is much more expensive than just ordering online or have it delivered at your door.
Yeah, I think the proper economical term, or maybe philosophical term that links to that, is that in that whole economical system, externalities are not taken into account. And externalities are all those costs that actually are contributing to a material, but which are not taken into the account. It's to make it with a very bold example, the cost of the person staying at home to care for the children is not taken into account in the value of the person working and doing their job somewhere else. That is an example, an extreme example of externalities. And you have the same with materials. I think the biggest externality that is present in material is the environmental impact. Environmental impact is in no way accounted for in the price of a material. Well, there may be some kind of CO2 tax or not, or whatever, but that's very minimal. But that is really, if you would add the environmental impact as a cost integrated in the price of the material, you would have probably a pivotal point in that material. That's only the moment when it will be the default position, when that happens.
Thank you so much. I see a question coming up here from Dr.
Just jumping on what you said last, Thomas, there is this whole school of studying the shadow cost of things, and so I think it's a dead end. I think it's a dead end, and it doesn't give the solution, because, of course, what will you transfer into costs? It's you have direct cost, you can see, you have indirect cost, and then and go on. It goes about the impact on the landscape. It goes on the impact on short-term impact, long-term impact. So this monetarization of what we are doing, I think it's a horrible business. Because in the end, everything becomes euros, and euros becomes everything. But there is, there's of course this necessity to rethink in our business, in our industry, the building industry, which is responsible for the largest amount of waste which is produced in this country, and I guess in most of the other countries also, to rethink this model. And there is one model, and for instance here in Brussels, it's about indeed standardization building with in a way you can demount, deconstruct easily it's a whole issue with normalization so that you can guarantee qualities and things like that. It's a whole setup to allow that indeed new products can be reused in a way, but it's very, let's say, it's really deciding how a building in the future will look like. And I think, for instance, in the United States, it's a lot like that already. In the United States, you don't have the freedom to design a window. You pick a window out of a catalog, but it was a limited number of types of window. And I think we can approach it in kind of an economic way and things like that, but I think fundamentally it's a cultural question. Where we come from a long history where we just took, where we consumed, and was a throwaway society, but the relationship with things was quite limited. And I think we're now getting into a period that this is not indeed sustainable. That when we throw things away, they never go, they stick to us, and that we have to do something with it. And I think in the way your practices were setting up, because it's not this model of standardization and reusing, but it's indeed, it starts from a deep understanding and relationship with a material. And this materiality is really defining what you're going to do with it and what kind of architecture will go, and where this architecture conceptually as an architecture will be about. So we take away the newness of an architecture proposal, the uniqueness, but becomes something which is hybrid, which brings its own history and becomes more like a multitude of voices from past and presence of a thing. It's nothing new, I agree, it's something which has been done, always been done. We've always been reusing building materials. It's only quite the last 100 years that we just, but I have no question, but it's just this, sorry, just a statement that I don't think we need an economic here, or maybe we need just to have the confrontation, but I think there is a very deep cultural turning point happening, and this is part of this ongoing reflection, and it creates a new. It puts us really into the question: what is our relationship with the materiality of things, which we cannot escape, as we know on this spaceship Earth.
Thomas Ooms, you said no more windows. What after that? And Patrick said standardization. And the question popped: what happens to our craftsmen when we go to in a full standardization? Because nowadays it's the craftsmen put everything together, but when standardization begins, it's just like playing with Lego, more or less. How do you think the role will change from now to then?
I think there will always be sort of a need for craftsmen, because you can standardize every piece of furniture or building or whatever. But in a building like this, you can just put any IKEA kitchen, for example, which is very much standardized sizes. You always have to adjust the small pieces around it, and there will always be need for someone to install or build whatever you ordered. But it does, yeah, take away some of the soul or creativity if everything would be standardized and just mass produced and like Lego click systems. And I think people will always be searching for something more unique or personal, or something that expresses something, or unique stuff to compare themselves to other people, for example. So I think there will always be some sort of demand for people who make creative and unique pieces.
Is there more?
No, but, I would like to come back to the idea of standardization. Is the thing you're proposing, Patrick, that we would say we will have to need to produce a whole new building lexicon and also a lot of new building materials? Or am I understanding you wrongly here? Or, I mean, when you were talking about standardization, is it something you propose in the sense that we will have to find new materials to produce these new materials? Or are you saying like standardization? Because we'd just like to add just a small thing here. I think also the things we're proposing here, I think also the work for Appel is also things in some way saying that standardization is already there. I mean, a brick is a standardization. I mean, that's the standard product, which is also for the past 100 years had been used and reused in a lot of different ways. And I think in some way, I mean, if I'm not understanding you wrongly here, I think personally, this really personally, I don't think we're right now in a situation that we can in some way try to envision a new batch of materials to be produced. I think we just have to in some way to work as good as we can with the existing building stock and find ways to reuse these materials.
I just wanted to point out that thinking about circularity, there are two schools. There's the school of reusing material in the way as four of you're doing, but there's also the other school, which is indeed promoted by a big lobby, which is about standardization, defining the right norms, obligation, ways how we can build so the construction can be easy. So there's not everything in this is stupid or wrong, but there is a, let's say that is maybe the main or the strongest school in this idea of circularization. We have to be aware that it's not present here on the chairs. Now, a second thing is that do we have to change lexicon? I think yes, we have to change lexicon, but that doesn't mean that it's for both schools. We have to change lexicon. Because when we change our relationship with materials, it's a fundamental change. That means that we are going to make a different architecture. And this, yes, so that is what I see. And I think that what is underneath there is this relationship with the things, which is profoundly changing, and it's a debate in society where we are actors and observers in the same time.
What was kind of an important role for us in the workshop that we're organizing tomorrow is also in architecture today, we see kind of dehumanization, and a lot of it is designed somewhere not in contact with the people that are actually building it, and we see that living in it, and like the cities that are actually for the people. And we see that in a lot of these projects that are more reused, they have a more human scale. For example, the things you are doing, Laurane, and also I think all of you, really have this human scale more into it. And kind of a question to you would be like, what do you think the role of this circular economy or circular building can be in a more social architecture and a more human architecture?
I think first of all is the fact that when the citizens are thinking about what they could build, they also know how to use it and how to renovate it and how to adapt it also. So they will be, it's not only participate on the construction, it's also participating on the life of this construction and the life of the bench you will build or anything. I think participative project, it makes sense in the whole life of adapting the object of the or the building to the use they need at that time or that moment. Yeah, the objective would be to, I mean, for the inhabitants or for the citizens, for the users, to be more aware of the space they are using, the space they are into. And sometimes we have a lot of disconnection of what we use, what we build, where we are, and why it was built like this. What was the function of what we built, and
yeah, I would like to add to that we all like to share what we know, and I think sharing, for instance, experiences of how it was to work with a certain material or how it was to demand a certain material, and sharing that knowledge, or sharing knowledge of how to clean a brick, or sharing knowledge of how to store wood dry in a good way. That could, I think, be an interesting opportunity for interaction, and it becomes an exchange of knowledge and experience. And in that sense, which is something different than going to buy material. If there is a kind of atelier or something where this knowledge can be shared, they can, I think the concept is by Mark Bull, they can become micro-public places where actually there is an exchange of something, in this case, information, of working together. And I think it would be an interesting design project to explore this idea of a reclaimed area as a micro-public place where you could exchange not only material, but also how it could be used.
there is another topic I would like to add. I don't know, for you also. That's I think that's working with natural materials. It's also something that give really less limits on how to reuse it, because in general, from my point of view, I think that working with natural materials, it's there is no limit of use. I mean, maybe it's I'm really I'm making a caricature of this, but when you build with big stones, the stones will stay stone, and you can still use it. Big beams of wood, you can still use it a long time. Today I was insulating with straw bale to make a straw bale insulation, and the straw bale.
You can still see it in her hair.
Yeah, sorry, that's why I'm still a bit. Sorry, I was in a hurry to go. But when you can still, when you unbuild, you can still use the straw bale and use it for something else. And when you work with industrialized materials, when you work with concrete or with OSB panels, it's, from my point of view, from my experience, it's way more difficult. And I think that natural materials, natural building is non-limits we use. I mean, maybe I'm really making a kind of, but working with whole earth, it's also, you can just, you remove the earth and you can still make it again and remix again and redo it. Yeah, it's a reflection, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, and it's true that that wasn't discussed yet. And what would come after that is actually materials that grow, bacteria, algae, and so forth. But it is 10 minutes past the time that we said we would stop. We didn't hear from Ghent. We see people there. We didn't hear from people at home. So I also want to give a last opportunity if somebody has a question that really needs to be put. Then you put too much pressure, of course, if you say that. who is the most important? But also here, are there questions left that you think like I really want to raise this? Sure. Yes, you dare.
Just wondering, because you talked about how you had participation of the homeless on the construction of this house, and then you also had 30 people participating. I was wondering if it's difficult to get people to participate in the design. Like, how does the process work?
I don't think it's difficult if you think it's possible and if you make it happen. The way of, for my experience and how to engage people, it's to really start with the beginning, what are the needs, and to talk, to really open the discussion between each other and to understand, really to open the feelings of the people and to understand what are the needs, and then making groups of small groups and then gather all the informations in bigger groups and then maybe spread in small groups again and then gather again and then vote for some solutions and make some presentations. That's what I did a lot when I was working in Portugal with critical concrete. And we did many solutions, groups and mixtures of ideas, and then showing how we do like this, how we decide this, why we decide this, always knowing the reason why we do this. And I think when the people understand the objective, the challenge, and the reasons why you build in this sense, it makes sense for everybody. And then I think it's, yeah, it can be possible. But we can also talk about this later if you want.
That is a suggestion because there is a bar, as I said, and you will stay probably for a while. We could even show the film maybe while talking and drinking. I think we should finish and wrap up now. If you three are happy with this, because it's your evening. Thank you for this evening a lot. I think it was great. I am looking forward to tomorrow, what's going to happen there. I think you all are. This topic, I think I almost said, I think it will be a year theme. So this is also an answer to you. I think there's so much interest basically from all of you about these kind of topics, and it's not possible to have one evening or 4 people covering it. There was last week that we had Anupama Kundo, who had a fantastic talk about especially these kind of things and how to work with also students a lot about this. We will have super use from the Netherlands who were at the forefront of these kinds of ideas. They will give a lecture here. So there will be many talks, many lectures and many courses about it and many more other things. So one thing I want to point out is the lecture of Thursday, which is coming up in Ghent, as I said before. It's by Petra Blaise. We invited her. She's from Inside Outside office that goes on both scales of interior architecture, so the extremely small domestic, towards landscape architecture, which is the extremely broad and big scale. So it goes in 2 directions, and I think she will tackle materiality a lot with that as well. So watch that in either of the 3 forms, online, here, or present in Ghent. Thank you for coming. Have nice drinks. Go here and let's show the movie. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming.